Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Love of Life podcast. And tonight we're going to talk about poison ivy.
No, we're not. We're not, but we do both have poison ivy, and it sucks.
Poison ivy is not fun at all.
Poison ivy rash. I
How
guess you
long-
don't have poison ivy. You have the rash.
I have the rash. You have the rash. How long have we had the rash?
Week and a half?
Week and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really weird because when you don't have something bad going on, it's just sort of like, that's everyday life and yay and everything. But when you do have something like poison ivy rash, it just makes for a very interesting time.
Well, yeah, it makes you realize how much you take just like feeling normal and healthy for granted.
Right.
We're not thankful enough
Exactly.
for it.
And my thought has been lately, like, why am I not extremely thankful for all the times I'm not sick, don't have poison ivy rash, because most of the time we don't have anything going on.
Yeah.
Something like that, out of the norm. But when it does happen, it's like, oh, I'm going to be so thankful the next time that I am just feeling 100%.
Yeah, just normal.
Just normal, yeah. So we've been talking also a lot about movies lately. Friday night, typically we have a movie family night, and that encompasses usually a bowl of ice cream and a movie. Mm-hmm. And what we've noticed is that it's been nice to have fun, some good family, wholesome entertainment, whatever. But it's also caused a lot of opportunity for discussion based on whatever we watch. Mm-hmm. So there's certain movies that we've seen. Think that we're probably going to highlight a few of them here. Their worldviews, what's behind them, things of that nature. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's some truth, I think, reflected in some of the movies we've watched, and then there are some things that are like, that worldview is incorrect, and like having a fuller discussion about, was that right? Was that wrong? What do you think about that? It's interesting, and it also teaches our kids not to just be consumers, teaches us not to just be consumers, just take in entertainment, but go, well, what's actually being said? What's the thought behind this or that?
Yeah.
We've been on a 90s Disney kick.
Yeah.
Not super happy with Disney and their ideology and the way that they're going, but there's still some old stuff that's good that has a lot of Christian capital underlining the stories.
Yeah.
So that's
with a mix of bad messaging, but it is interesting how early 90s Disney had a lot more of Christian thinking in some ways regarding some of the basic ideology or basic thinking behind life. But how far they have fallen since then, like you don't, that Christian capital, as you say, it's like we're very, very far downstream from that, and pretty much it is all withered and dried up at this point in the Disney world.
Yes.
But so there's some movies, particularly what?
Well, the most recent that we watched as a family was The Little Mermaid, which took us a few minutes to talk the boys into that one. We had to watch a boy movie first, and then we could watch that.
Right.
And you want to talk about the problems first, or the things that were good? The problems?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Well, I think like right off the bat, you have rebellion and disobedience from Ariel. We also kind of talked about the parallels between her and Eve, actually. In that she wants something, and instead of going to her father and talking about what she's wanting, she is basically seduced by the sea witch to have what she wants on her terms, in her way. She can just go ahead and grab it and have it. And she gets herself in a really perilous situation, which is all predicated, by this disobedience and rebellion. And then in the end, I'm kind of jumping ahead, so just stop me if you have more thoughts. But in the end, the thing that she's actually wanting, which is legs, which is like a whole nother thing. Like, should she even have wanted that? Should she have been content? I don't know, but we won't go there. We'll just say her father was able to give her the thing that she truly desired. But she tried to go about it in this like evil way versus waiting, talking to him, hearing his reasoning for maybe she could have legs at some point, but just not
Right.
right then.
So you said that correlates a lot to Eve in the garden,
Mhm.
whereas God said, "Hey, this is the forbidden fruit. You don't touch it. Knowledge of good and evil. You don't touch this. You don't touch this, lest you die." The ultimate goal, though, was for Adam and Eve to eventually have fruit and have that fruit, or have whatever it was that God was saying, "No, not right now.
Right, they could have
Don't touch
fruit from
this."
all the trees except for the tree of the knowledge of
Good
good
and
and
evil,
evil.
right?
That was the one restriction, but Eve was tricked into going ahead and taking from that. And yes, there's lots of thought around the fact that it wasn't a forbidden forever tree, that
Right.
eventually that was a tree that God would let them eat from, but it was a not now, not yet. And then because she and Adam both eat from that tree, then God kicks them out of the garden for their own protection so that they won't reach out and take from the tree of life and then be stuck in this separation from God forever state, this state of sin
Yeah.
for eternity. So,
So-
but I mean, ideally, if they would have matured and continued to live in the garden with Yahweh, they could have taken from the tree of life, and then maybe they would have been ready for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
But they take it their own way. There's a grabbing
Right.
with that.
So as odd as it sounds, Little Mermaid and the story of Eve really do have some
Some
weird parallels there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, another thing that stood out to me this time around, and I never noticed these lyrics. I gotta look them up really quick.
Oh yeah, Women's Lib
There
was
is
in-
some feministic.
was all over Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Yeah, the song that Ariel sings, at the beginning, I think.
Part of your world. Part of that world?
Right.
I think it's.
Yeah. She basically is a second, maybe third wave feminist.
Yeah.
with the lyrics, at least.
Yeah, I had never heard this before, but, she's like thinking about all these things that the world up above holds and how great they are. And then there's this line: betcha on land they understand, betcha they don't reprimand their daughters, bright young women sick of swimming, ready to stand. And I'm like, first of all, if the fathers up there don't reprimand their daughters, that is huge cause for concern for their daughters, for society. So to think that to be free from a reprimand, free from a father who loves and disciplines and leads and guides and nurtures, that's a problem. That you see that as restrictive authority that's gonna crush your life and kill your dreams.
Right.
But bright young women, sick of swimming, ready to stand.
Ready to stand.
Yeah, take the
There it
shackles of
is.
this fin off where I can swim all over the wide, broad, diverse ocean with all sorts of life and
Yeah.
cool stuff, ready to stand.
Yeah. It's so bizarre.
It's so
It's so bizarre that that's packed in to these kids songs that really do have an ideology that, and even at the time, that was, I think, 1989 that movie came out, something like that. I think it was like the late 80s, early 90s. And so you do have a generation of people that were told, hey, you don't discipline your child with a rod. I think that became out. That was like Dr. Spock era or whatever. That was even before our time. But we had a generation of people that were like, don't reprimand Johnny. Don't discipline him, especially with a rod or with a spoon or whatever. And in a biblical kind of way. We did have a world and a generation that, by and large, did not grow up disciplined, reprimanded in the right kinds of godly ways.
There's that idea
needed to take
that
place.
True freedom is to do whatever you want.
Right.
But that's not true freedom. That is slavery.
Yeah.
To just do whatever you want, be at the whims of your emotions and your desires, that traps you. True freedom, the law of liberty sets us free to obey God's commands. We are free to do good. We are set free to walk in his ways, not our own ways that lead to death, but his ways that lead to life.
Yeah.
Which is like Deuteronomy 28, like spelled out.
Yeah.
That I sent. Did you read that the other night?
No, you sent it to me, but I didn't take a look at it. No.
Okay. Deuteronomy 28, it's basically where God is laying before the Israelites, if you serve me, these are the blessings that you will have, that your land will have, that generations after you will have. And if you don't, these are all the things that will happen. And it gets like crazy. It gets into like, things will be so bad and there will be so much oppression and you will be like in such like terrible circumstances that even like kind men will eat their own children and deny it to the wife that they share their home with, because they will just want to eat that child like by themselves. And a woman, even the most delicate, who won't even set her foot on the dirt and something like that, will eat her afterbirth and her children and like keep it from her husband. It's like, it's really gross. And just,
yeah, it is really gross. How did you get on this point?
Because we are free to obey.
What does this have to do with Little Mermaid?
Disobedience leads to terrible, like wanting to hide and eat your children.
Yes.
Kind of.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It is. And life, God sets before us life, and there is life attached to obedience. And of course, in Christ, we have perfect obedience, and that's where our salvation comes from, his perfection. But we, as we grow in Christ and are sanctified and matured, we are more and more free to let go of our own selfish desires and more free to walk in his ways. So,
yeah. No, that's really good. That's really good. That's an enormous jump, but you did it, and that actually worked. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. Okay, so is any more?
Another good thing about the Little Mermaid?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the end, what happens?
In the end, she gets married, and
before
essentially,
that. Okay, so they're on the boat. Sorry,
come on,
like,
Little Mermaid.
I'm trying to volley it up so you can.
Okay.
So they're on the boat. The sea witch is tricking Eric. She's got him under a spell.
Okay.
He's about to marry her,
Uh-huh.
and then the Little Mermaid will never have her voice again, and like the time runs out. Like the sun's setting and he says, I love you. He realizes Ariel's the one with the voice. She's the one that he's loved all along. But the sea witch says it's too late. And she takes her. She is her prisoner.
Yeah.
And she has sinned. She has lied. She has disobeyed her father. She's gotten herself in this mess. But what does her father do?
Oh, yeah. He offers himself.
He offers himself in her place.
Yeah.
He's more powerful. He's like the king of the ocean, but he offers himself in her place, which is such a Christ-like thing to do.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And then you also see Eric being a protector. He's not even like an ocean person. I mean, he's a sailor, but he's not like a merman. And he jumps in and he's also trying to come to her rescue, to her defense. And then, of course, like this evil, power-hungry, truly evil character who's like into witchcraft and sorcery and all that, she falls into the pit that she digs for herself. Like her giant self gets struck by lightning and impelled by a boat, thanks to Eric, and then the curse is reversed.
It's interesting how that theme is repeated in other movies too, like Snow White. You have the evil queen who literally the rock or whatever, the huge stone falls back on her at the end, and she falls into the pit in which she dug for others.
Which is a proverb, straight up a
she
proverb.
Falls into, right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So that theme is repeated. It's interesting how that sense of the biblical worldview is, to some extent, the best stories, even though they're very imperfect. We're not exalting Disney here or even old Disney by any means, but we are saying that there is this sort of biblical understanding within a really, really good story of themes like redemption,
evil really being evil,
being evil,
and a moment in time where evil seems like it's about to wipe out the good, but then good just swallows up the evil.
Yeah.
The gospel swallows up evil, just flattens it. Yeah. And redemption and your life, my life for yours. You see that a lot in good movies. those are all Christian ideas. Those are all biblical ideas.
What was that movie title? I heard it was a horrible movie. Was that movie called Me Before You? Or something like that? Do you remember that movie? I think the whole movie was about, and I didn't see it, but I think that the gist of the movie was basically about I'm more important than you in some kind of way or something like that. And even by the title, like Me Before You, instead of a gospel-centered kind of story of, hey, I'll lay down my life for you, you know. And I think that's one of the problems when you look at certain movies today. They can't, there's almost like, and not every movie, but there's this sense of, where are those old themes? Why can't they show those old themes of a man dying for a woman? Why can't they do that? Why can't they have a man lay down his life for his bride or for his woman or for the woman that he loves? Like, they can't even show it because the world itself wants to lie about nature today. They don't want to actually tell the truth about anything.
Yeah.
They don't want to say that a boy is a boy and only that. They don't want to say a girl's a girl, only that. Like, they want to lie. You know, we have these like DEI massive campaigns that are lying to the world about everything. And so as a result, even in, you know, weirdo Hollywood land, like you can't even get a story that mirrors and reflects, even in a dim kind of way, that biblical understanding of love, redemption, and the things that they could do 30 years ago. They're almost, I don't want to say completely incapable, but I don't know if I've seen a good example.
No, they're not. They're not satisfying stories. They don't ring true to humans. They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a swing and a miss.
Yeah. What were some other films or anything else that we've been kind of watching?
Another movie
lately?
we watched was Night at the Museum.
Night at the Museum. Was there any takeaway with that?
Yeah, there were some things that we had to correct.
Oh yeah.
We had to
their
talk
history.
About their
history
revisionist
was
history. Yeah, like
bunk.
The Civil War. There's really
nonsense
about that.
Yeah.
But it was cool to be able to ask, especially our sons who are older, like, did you catch that? What were they saying? Is that true? And then them being able to debunk some of that stuff. They had cavemen, like as if really we used to be cavemen. No, we did not. There was evolutionary thought, which, you know, we're like able to ask them, whose theory is that, and is that true? And, you know, just it becomes a springboard for reviewing what you know. Where do those thoughts come from? And then what does the Bible teach?
Yeah. I think that is the thing that is very helpful right now, is that as the boys are learning the Bible, as they're learning true history, being able to juxtapose that with good or okay entertainment and then having these conversations with them is very it's very helpful, because they're going to see, who was it, George Grant said years ago that he had a son who watched a commercial, and every time a commercial would come on, his son realized there was a worldview behind the commercial. Like, oh, this is just, you know, paganism, or this is just this comes from Rousseau. This philosophy comes from Rousseau. And he told, I believe his dad, he told his dad, he's like, Dad, you ruined me, which is great. You want to ruin your children in the right kinds of ways.
Ruin them.
You want to ruin them for the word. For the world, and the way you do that is by showing the word and demonstrating truth. And then when you watch something that is okay or decent, close to truth, beauty, and goodness, you can then have conversations to say, hey, this was good here and here, but where did it fall short? You know,
talk about the good
instead of just outright rejecting everything, you know, and saying, well, you know, this isn't, I was about to say VeggieTales, but VeggieTales really isn't all that good. You know, this isn't a direct Bible story, but this is a story that has elements, themes that are biblical in nature. We can talk about these themes because some of these are a true reflection of the way that God made and set up the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and if anything, it's not only is it entertaining and fun to do that with our kids, to watch the movie itself, and to be a little nostalgic, movies that we grew up with and such, but to then have these conversations with them, it's very sharpening.
Yeah, so one thing you watched recently with the boys was Back to the Future, and one of our sons said, I don't get why Dad likes that movie. I mean, it's like about cars and like space, like this. Maybe I don't even know him. That just doesn't seem like something he would like. Which
it's not about space, but...
No, it's not, which I thought was really funny, but you had just been sharing with me some of like the deep things that you pulled from that movie, so then I got to connect you two to have the conversation. But What are some of the reasons that you like that movie and some of the merit that you see that's kind of just beyond the fun and the cars and the
Yeah. Yeah, apart from just
time travel?
the nostalgia and the time travel and the fun that movie, that those three movies actually are, Back to the Future, is that it's really a story about family, and especially part one. It's all about how Marty has to rescue his parents, that is, to get them together, so that way they can do the one thing that God made for them to do, which was to be married and have children and have offspring. And even though there's nothing truly innately biblical about the movie, under the surface, foundationally, it very much is. In the sense that here's a character who he realizes the biggest thing. I mean, you're talking about a time travel movie, you could do anything with this movie, but the thing that the storytellers do is portray this idea that family matters the most.
Yeah.
And without existence, you don't get to live. So the thing that, as the viewer, as the person who's watching this, realizes, like, the crux of it all is just to live in this world and to have parents that ideally love you, parents that take care of you,
Yeah.
brothers and sisters in your life. And if you peel back to the future, the main crux of it all is family,
Life and family.
life and family, and living.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. That made him understand. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's more like it. This is a movie we did not watch with the kids, but we watched Woman in Gold,
Yep.
which is kind of a
World War II
World War II
story.
It's biographical, but it's takes some liberties. About a woman who was Jewish in World War II and whose family was pilfered by the Nazis. They had all this amazing artwork and famous paintings, and they were stolen during that time. And she lives, and then a lot of her family dies through Nazi occupation. And then years later, like how many years later? 50 years later?
40, 50 years later. Yeah.
Yeah. She gets a lawyer and then what country was it?
Austria.
Yeah. She basically is in like a 10-year long court battle against Austria, trying to get them to right this wrong, that these paintings were taken, and one of the main paintings being called Woman in Gold, that was actually painted of her aunt, and wanting those back. They were their family heirlooms and they were stolen. So anyway, to give away the whole story, so if you're going to watch it, skip this part. But she goes through all this long battle, and you see these flashbacks of her family and, kind of what they've gone through, and it's compelling. And then at the end, eventually, she does win. They try to just drag it out in court until she dies because she's old. But she gets the paintings back. And even in the movie, like, she goes out, she doesn't celebrate. She's not like, jumping up and down. She goes out and she cries. And she tells her lawyer, like, I thought this would make it better, but it really doesn't. Like, her family's still gone. What happened still happened. This doesn't make up for it. But she also makes the remark, do you remember how she says it?
Yeah, she tells the people that did this to her she would never forgive them. And it was kind of the main point of the movie. And it was a main sort of like beat to the movie, where she's standing up and she says, and they're almost trying to make it inspirational. Like, there's this inspirational music going, and you see the people's reactions in the audience, because she's older, the gal who is trying to obtain her family's heirlooms back. And she says, I just want them to know I will never forgive them for what they've done. And you think it's like oh yeah, that's good. Don't forgive them. That's right. They've done so bad. And it's like, oh, that's completely counter to the gospel. That's completely counter to what we know as Christians that we're called to do. Very antithetical to like the life of Corrie ten Boom and her sister for eventually forgiving the Nazis in a Christ-like way. But also we know, I mean, the gal, of course, is Jewish. We know that only through Christianity do we really have a solid understanding of grace and true forgiveness? Because it's completely the opposite of how the world would think through the most heinous things that could happen to you. Like, what would the reaction be for people that don't know Christ? It would be never to forgive. And there is sort of a sense of pride and just a hubris, an attitude that says, I will not forgive. But
well, humanly, we can see justice in that. You wronged me. It's atrocious.
Right.
I will not ever forgive you. It's a human response that is understandable, hatred and unforgiveness.
Yeah.
But it's not satisfying.
No.
It's not, like, I actually didn't even think about it the night we watched it, because there's also like emotional parts and it's very compelling. She has to leave her family, and like I'm thinking about it as a daughter and as a mother, and it's like just making me really sad.
Yeah.
That whole like being torn from your family aspect. But then it was like the next morning I woke up and was like, oh, there's no forgiveness.
Yeah.
That's what was missing.
Yeah.
You're not even glad at the end, even though she gets these paintings, and I think she already was wealthy, but you know, she gets even more wealthy and all her descendants can have it, and they don't even show her husband or her four children in the movie. So it's also like, she just seems like this old woman that's alone that has nothing except for these old memories. But without there being any forgiveness, it just falls flat.
Yeah.
It's like, so you got your stuff back, and that there's a justice in that.
Yeah.
But if you're empty inside and you walk in unforgiveness, like, it's death to your spirit.
Yeah.
So what did you gain?
Yeah.
But yeah, all the teachings that are directly forgive as your Father in heaven has forgiven you. All of those scriptures we have fulfilled in the life and the work of Christ.
Yeah.
So that is what compels a Christian, like Corrie ten Boom, to be able to say, in and of myself, no, I cannot forgive my former captors for what they did, but I know that God says, if I don't forgive, he does not forgive me, and I need his forgiveness, so I'll be obedient. And then the Lord really, in the moment where she was faced with that moment, filled her with, as she reached out her hand to shake her former captor's hand and offer forgiveness, the Holy Spirit did give her all the accompanying true heart release of forgiveness, that she could forgive him in Christ and be free. Yeah.
And she later said, you have never touched so the ocean of God's love as that you forgive your enemies, which is
so cool.
Yeah. Okay, any other movies, any other things that we've watched or seen, or conversations regarding movies or films that we've had in the last little bit?
I mean, we have had a lot more, but I think those are the main ones. I think one more that you could just touch on, just the ending part, is Beauty and the Beast, because that's actually one of my favorite animated movies, and one of your favorite animated movies, since we were children. And you learned something very cool about one of the ending scenes.
Yeah, the ending scene with the Beast when he's rising from the dead, it was illustrated by a Christian who wanted to show, if he could in some kind of way, the gospel being portrayed in a way that was actually more of the resurrection. So you have a resurrection of the Beast at the end when he's rising from the dead, turning into a man. Just like someday we'll come back, our bodies will rise again, we'll have resurrected bodies. So it was it's very interesting that back in the 90s, you had a Christian illustrator wanting to demonstrate the resurrection, and he did it in probably the most powerful scene in Beauty and the Beast, and maybe even in all of Disney films. I mean, I think it's one of the best scenes in animated, as far as animated movies go. Yeah. And it's done with somebody who has a true Christian worldview about the resurrection of the dead.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, yeah.
So watch the movies and discuss them.
Watch
Check
some
out
movies,
the good, the
talk
bad,
about them, yeah.
The wrong, the right.
Yeah, and is this something that you do? You can leave a comment if you want to below. Let us know if talking about movies with your family, with your children, is something that you do, or maybe you've never even done it before, and movies for you are just sort of like a thing that you do. You just watch and you turn off, and you go to the next thing. And for a while, I think there's a lot of movies that we do that. We just haplessly entertain ourselves sometimes and don't really talk. But in the last few years, we probably do talk
We
about
can't stand
everything.
to not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And some things we can't even stomach. We can't even watch them, and not because they're like necessarily filthy, but like the worldview is so obvious
Yeah.
that it's painful. It's not even a good story. It doesn't even draw you in. It's just like, oh, you can tell the 5 things that they're really trying to say in this show or in this movie. I'd rather not.
You mean like an Englishman in Moscow? I mean, a Russian in Moscow? Or what is that movie called? A Gentleman?
A Gentleman in Moscow.
A Gentleman in
I
Moscow?
remember reading the book years ago, and I really liked it, I think. So now I gotta revisit it. Because I actually don't feel like the show's anything like the book.
Yeah.
And maybe I just don't remember. But yeah, it's just...
Checking all the
It's
boxes.
checking all the boxes of the diversity of the cast, and then like we're kind of both after the second episode went, who are we supposed to like?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to like any of these people? Because we don't.
Right.
There's like the, very feministic woman who thinks she's everything. And I get sometimes you have to have a story arc and you have to have character development.
That's fine.
But it's just like right off the bat, like you've got a weak male lead and
Weak male lead, strong female character.
Yeah, you have
Coming
all
in.
the stereotypical. These are the things you must have in a show or a movie in 2024 to meet the quotas.
And of all things, forget just the DEI silliness of it all. We have not heard in 2-3 episodes. We have not heard one Russian accent.
No, they're all
The
English.
weirdest thing.
It's so weird.
They're all English actors in Moscow, Russia. What?
It's like you're not in Russia. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Okay. All right. Anyway.
Sorry if you like that show.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It's not for us.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thanks a lot.